Into this, the voice bellowed, "I am who I am." At first, I thought maybe this was just God's way of saying, "Hey, I exist. I am real. Notice me." Or maybe it was God's way of avoiding the question. I ask, "Who are you?" And he says, "I am what I am." In other words, it's none of your business who I am, Moses. But the more I've thought about it, the more the whole "I am" thing has begun to strike a chord. You see, I keep asking which one of the gods is real. But that question already assumes I know what the meaning of is. What is is-ness? What does it mean to exist, to be something that is rather than isn't? If the gods are just other beings that exist, then they must derive their existence from something else. And that source would be the true God, wouldn't it? An excerpt from Zeus Was an Atheist. I'm on a mission to make learning the Bible and talking about God fun, and to show that we can do so in a worshipful, honoring, reverent way. When I first met author and professor J.D. Lyonhart last year to talk about his book, The Journey of God, I knew I met a fellow compatriot in this mission. His books are incredibly fun and funny, while also wrestling with deep philosophical, biblical issues. His latest book is called Zeus Was an Atheist, an odd retelling of the Moses story. Even the title elicits a chuckle. The book puts you in the mind of Moses, not from a "this is surely what he was thinking" standpoint, but yes, an odd retelling standpoint. We walk with Moses through all of the Exodus events you know, but we listen as Moses wrestles with, meditates on, and acknowledges who God is. God is being. God is beauty. God is goodness, truth, justice. J.D. Lyonhart is Associate Professor of Religion and Philosophy at the University of Jamestown. He is a fellow at the Cambridge Center for the Study of Platonism at Cambridge University and co-host of the Spiritually Incorrect podcast. This conversation today, much like the book itself we're talking about, is both fun and thought-provoking, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we did. My name is Jason Wieland, and this is Doable Discipleship. Now, my conversation with J.D. Lyonhart. All right, J.D. Lyonhart back, returning champion. It's good to see you, man. How you doing?
That's how I want to be introduced from now on by everyone. Returning champion. Yes.
Well, I mean, with fanfare, if I knew what the buttons did on my device over here, I could get like some clapping or some horns or something like that. I just don't know what they do.
Yeah, a horn, like a Lord of the Rings horn.
Exactly.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to be here. I really enjoyed the last talk. You're easy to talk to. Oh. I like people who are easy to talk to, because I can do really well with those people. But if someone's heart not great at it, I'm not good enough to compensate for them. So I kind of ride behind you and you block the wind. So this works.
We're a tag team. I think we said the last time we talked, we were like, wait, did we just become best friends? This is amazing. And so I'm excited to get to, dive into your new book here. Zeus Was an Atheist, an odd retelling of the Moses story. I'll put a link in the show notes. It's a fun, short book, but it's so much fun. I mean, it starts out by saying that this is a book about swashbuckling. So I don't know what you can't really ask for more if you're diving into a book specifically about Moses. But I do have a bone to pick with you as we get started.
All right, pick away.
All right. When I first typed in Zeus Was an Atheist into my Google search bar when I was first looking it up when you sent me about the book early on, a Gemini came back right away and said Zeus was not an atheist. Google Gemini has issues with you, and now I'm confused. So talk to us about the title. Where did this come from in relation to an odd retelling of the Moses story?
Yeah, so I think there's a common critique that atheists use, which is along the lines of, you Christians are atheists about thousands of other gods.
Yeah.
Some of us just go one God more. As if to say all of these gods are not just equal in terms of how much evidence there is for them, but that they're all the same type of claim. And that if you understand why you reject one, you understand why you reject all of them, right? But the thing about the Christian God and the Old Testament Jewish God that we kind of inherit is, I think he portrays himself as somehow broader and bigger than the mythological characters. And there's a philosophical reason for that. And that's where it ties to the story with Moses. When Moses encounters God at the burning bush, he asks God what his name is. And God says, I am. I am what I am.
Yeah.
And so God's sort of self-identification is the one who is. I am. And on the one hand, that can mean God's presence with us here in time and space. Like, God is close. I am with you. I'm the one that's here in history and time. But I take an additional interpretation that I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I also say that I think there's a sense in which God isn't just a being, he's being itself.
Yeah.
He's not another created entity. He is the creator of all things. And that's where I think there's a huge difference between the Jewish and Christian metaphysics, our world picture, and say Greek mythology. Is in the Greek mythological universe, Zeus is supposed to be like the most powerful and mighty of the gods, right? But
Yeah.
Zeus is born. Zeus has a dad, and his dad tries to eat him and his kids, right? And if you go back far enough, Zeus has a parent who has a parent who has a parent, and eventually there's not some grand parent of all the universe. These gods just sort of spring from chaos. And so what's at the heart of all of existence in the Greek mythological universe? It's not mind, it's not love, it's not God, it's chaos. Now, over time, you wait long enough, chaos will eventually pop out an entity here or there. But those entities aren't part of the foundation and fabric of existence itself, right?
Yeah.
They're creatures. And so Zeus is a creature. He began to exist. He isn't eternal. He's not outside of time. And so Zeus is a creature, a mighty, powerful creature, but a creature nonetheless. And so in that sense, Zeus isn't qualitatively distinct from us.
Yeah.
He's quantitatively distinct from us. Like, we just took the power of a king, combined it with the muscle of, a truck or something, added in the lightning up in the clouds and said, boom, there's a god. But this entity isn't the creator of all things. He doesn't stand outside of creation and birth it. No, he's one of the creatures, the most powerful creature perhaps, but still a creature nonetheless. And so I think I was trying to say that if we're talking about a God who is the creator of all things, who is being, goodness, beauty, love, truth, justice itself, if we're talking about that kind of God, then Zeus is an atheist.
Yeah.
The Greek mythological universe has at its heart not divinity, but chaos. And so in that sense, Zeus would know better than anyone that there's no deeper meaning behind things. And so if for you, gods just mean big creatures like superheroes in the clouds, then, okay, why would I reject one and not the other? But if we're talking about something deeper, an entity who's somehow at the heart of the metaphysics and fabric of reality, that's a much more interesting claim.
Yeah, it's really this encouragement to think about what deity means in a deeper way. That's essentially what we're getting at, is this idea of who do you think of when you think of God versus you think of the gods that come from lore or come from other religions or whatnot. And you can see that there are inherent differences. So what's fun about this book is, yes, it reads like a novel of Moses' journey, but really you're wading pretty deep into some philosophy, metaphysics stuff here, but all through a fun way, for sure. Now, be honest with me. Were you picturing the Zeus from Disney's Hercules the entire time that you were writing this book as your picture of Zeus?
Honestly, I can't actually picture Zeus from the Hercules movie. I can picture Hercules.
Okay.
I definitely have Hercules. I've got Danny DeVito.
Yeah.
Right there in my head
Phil,
as the little
for
fawn.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't, what kind of Zeus? I don't even know if I had a Zeus. I think I just pictured muscles and a lightning bolt. I guess I started writing it around actually the time the second Thor, Love and Thunder came out.
Yeah.
So maybe Russell Crowe.
Okay.
As Zeus in that one.
Okay, in the interest of warding off the comments, Love and Thunder was the fourth Thor movie, just to clarify. Not the
second. I thought
it was the second with Taika Waititi.
Yes, you're right. No, you're right. I'm sorry.
It may this be the only podcast that you do about this book that talks about Thor, Love and Thunder, because that's just something special to us. Now and
that'll just be our thing.
Yeah. Exactly.
Just you and me.
So okay, so we've set up Zeus and we've set up like kind of to set this picture and to paint this as something different, something apart. That the God of the Bible is different than these gods who were born of other gods, who ultimately were born of chaos. And in the book, you talk about Zeus, you talk about Set, you get some of those Egyptian gods in there too. So let's then shift a little bit to talk about the Exodus story. What is it about the Exodus story that drew you to want to write a whole retelling of it?
Yeah, so I think even before, because I didn't grow up initially going to church. We started going to church when I was a bit older. And I think one of the first exposures to religion was from my grandmother, who watched The Prince of Egypt with me.
Yes.
And so the book is dedicated to her because, I don't remember a lot. I just remember us watching it and that stuck with me. And we had some other moments here and there that were of a religious nature. And so I think watching that with her is what kind of kicked off a lifelong love of the story. And I think for a lot of people just love Moses and the Exodus story. There's just something about it iconic. And there was a movie that came out when we were kids. I don't know if there's a better answer than that, but from that was the seed at least. I've just always loved the story, and I think it feels very philosophical. Even if I'll admit that at times I'm reading a little bit into the stories to make my points, but I don't think I'm reading that into it. Like Moses encounters a God who says, "I am." And then I also get into the philosophy of morality and goodness. Well, that's the 10 Commandments. Like I'm not imposing that on the text. This is a story that is historical. It has characters, events, but it also has big ideas, and those flow into each other naturally, right? I disagree with a lot of people who think you should keep metaphysics out of stories. I think metaphysics should be in stories. It should just be done in a way that is true to both metaphysics and to the characters in the stories. And I think the Moses story brings all those together well in a way that I like. So,
well, Moses is a great vessel for this, because I think a lot of times we read the Exodus account and we just read it for the plot. And we're just great. Okay, so we have Moses as a baby, and then we get to Moses murders the Egyptian, and then he runs away. We get the burning bush. Then we get him going to Pharaoh. We get the plagues. So it's just kind of plot.
And then God
plot
murders the Egyptians.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so we get plot to plot, and it is an epic story. That's why they make movies like the 10 Commandments or Exodus, Gods and Kings, or the Prince of Egypt. It's why they make movies about it, because it is narrative. It's cinematic in a way. But what it's nice about this and the encouragement for us is to kind of stop and be like, let's remember that these are like real people, and there's all this other stuff going on. There's this thought life, this wondering, this struggling, trying to figure out as a people who God is, because this is, years removed from all of the stories from Genesis. And so it's a people who've been enslaved and need to rebuild this relationship with God and trust him and follow. So there's all of these things going on for sure.
Totally.
And so, yeah, it kind of warrants this, hey, let's take a look back and let's kind of dive into this in a fun, engaging way that's also going to make you think about justice and beauty and morality and truth and all these other things.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you're emphasizing that, because a lot of the interviews I have, we talk about the ideas, and then I think people get the impression at the end, oh, like that's a big academic book. I should stay away from that. But I'm like, no, it's a story. I'm having fun. This is a fun story, and Moses parts the sea, and it's awesome.
Again, I've mentioned this earlier, but it's so important because I do want people to read this book because it is fun. The literal first few sentences of the introduction, this little book is meant to be fun and swashbuckling and thought-provoking. Like, you don't get a better Christian book starting than it's meant to be fun and swashbuckling and knowing that you're reading a fun book about Moses. So again, this type of book is so right up my alley that if you've been listening to these podcasts and you're like, hey, I maybe like Jason's sentiment on things, you would like this book. So that's why I'm encouraging it.
Awesome. Well, then I guess I got what I needed from this interview. I've gotten the publicity. I guess we can just end now.
Yeah, you got some blurbs that you can pull out and use now. Okay, we've touched on this idea of God is. God says, I am, and then talking about I love that you keep going back to the word itself. And that's something that is a through line in the book. He is being itself, beauty itself, truth itself, and so on and so forth. Can you unpack how you came upon these core themes or attributes or elements, truth realities of God? Because they fit so well with the narrative of Exodus. And so walk us through kind of the core point of kind of soaking in, baking in these true realities of who God is.
Yeah. So, I mean, these categories go back thousands of years, and I think they're at the heart of everything it means to be human. What is being itself? What is goodness itself, love itself, justice itself, right? Not just in this context or time and place, but what's the thing in itself? How do we actually gaze eternity in the face? Like, what is God actually in himself? And yeah, and I think it does pair nicely with the Moses story, because the I am is talking about what does it mean to be. The Ten Commandments is trying to get at what is goodness itself, right? Like, I don't think people interpret the Ten Commandments as this isn't goodness itself. It's just goodness in one time or place or context, right? Like, I think we do that with a lot of the Bible, but there's something about the Ten Commandments that does feel like it's trying to say something more universal about goodness itself, right? Like, this is the law. And I wouldn't say that that's the only thing to morality, but I do think there's a broader claim here. Like, these are written in stone. It's different from don't eat shellfish in a way, right? Like, it's talking about goodness and morality itself there. And philosophically, for me, I'm interested in how morality and beauty and goodness look in different contexts, but I want to know what they are in themselves. And I think that's what drives us to religion, is that we see lots of different good people down here on earth. What unites them all? What is this thing called goodness itself? And is it anything? I think a kind of a nihilist view would say there is no such thing as goodness itself. Yeah. That's just a social construct, right? There's no capital G good. There's just what this person calls good and that person calls good, and this person doesn't agree with either of them. So it's all just social constructs, right? But if you actually believe that, morality isn't just a social construct or an evolutionary byproduct, but somehow more than that, then what is goodness itself? What is this eternal law of right and wrong? And I think most of us, if we're being truly honest, in our heart believe in that, even if we've decided that we can't believe in it because it's not rational or something. I think in our hearts, most of us believe that love is objectively better than hate, regardless of whatever context you are in. That there is something that is higher than just this person's definition of love, that person's definition of love, that evil person's definition of love, which is abusive, right? Like those aren't all equal definitions, because there is a higher standard of love and goodness by which we can judge one standard as falling short or reaching closer toward it. For me, love itself, goodness itself, being itself is a way of getting past just particular definitions to the thing itself. And I think when you do that, you're encountering something that's eternal.
Yeah.
Because if morality is something that begins to exist in time, I invent this morality, you invent that, then I don't really feel like it's binding. That's just like someone invented the rules of a game, and because they're invented, someone else can come along and invent new rules, right?
Yeah.
But if there's an eternal, timeless definition that's always what love is, and what goodness is, and what beauty is, and what being is, then you can really talk about these things not just as inventions or social constructs or things we made up to control people. You can actually talk about the eternal source of love and goodness itself. And I think the follow-up question is that source personal or not? Because it's possible to take a religious view of the world where there is an eternal source of love, goodness, being, truth, justice, but it's not a personal source, right? So that's another question there. But even just to talk about an eternal source of love and goodness, you're already beyond what scientific materialism admits, right? You're already talking about something that I think is religious, even if it's not yet a personal thing. You're already beyond materialism and matter being all there is. You're talking about something eternal that is love, that is goodness. So,
as you were talking about it, I couldn't help but kind of think of the logical progression that comes from this idea of being of itself, and pointing back to like all these attributes are just inherent in God, in being itself, but then also taking kind of the next step into kind of the biblical look at it, right? So for example, if you have something like beauty or morality, right? You talked about the 10 Commandments. We talked about beauty with creation, right? If you take that God is beauty itself, morality itself, then it stems to reason that the things that are made from God, so all of creation, or the 10 Commandments being given as law. And I love how you framed it in the book about how Moses is like, how do I lead these people? How do I make law? And how do I get them to treat each other well? And God says, here's these 10 Commandments to bring down. And so you have these things. So inherently, the things that are made or given by beauty and morality itself are then inherently good or moral or beautiful. And those are things, so we can take beauty, take the beauty of creation as being an offshoot, a stem, a creation from beauty itself. That then points back to, okay, if this is beautiful, if this waterfall, if this forest, if this mountain or whatever is beautiful, well, this is even just a thing that beauty itself made. So that then should point you back to beauty itself, be how even more beautiful is beauty itself than the created thing. And the same thing with morality. Like, yes, we get these 10 Commandments, and then we in our broken humanness have to take these and try to, live in them. But how much more moral and good is goodness, is morality itself, that than just these things that were given to us. So anything that is a step removed from the thing itself is inherently something a little bit that's pointing then to the thing itself.
Yeah, it's like reflecting it. And it's like the earth. Like, when you see a tree, you're seeing the light, but you're not seeing the sun itself. And yet the light draws the eye up to the source of the light. Yeah. And I think that's a good way to put it. Like, if you see a tree illuminated by light, well, the light isn't the fire itself, right?
Yeah.
But it does point you towards the source of all of that light that is the fire in itself.
And that's what Moses sits in your odd retelling of the Moses story, is he is sitting in that and saying, wow, how much more should I think about or love or admire God, who is these things itself, than these things that I'm trying to figure out and wrestle with and admire here on earth. Wow, how much more should I admire the source itself? But then I wanted to take the next biblical step, because you said then the next question is that thing personal? Is that being personal? And I'm, in jumping from a Christian perspective, assuming yes, from a pastoral perspective, what I couldn't help point back to is then, wow, like we do have a personal God who invites us into not just relationship with himself, but abiding in himself. And so when we, take that John 15 mentality of abiding with Christ, you are then abiding in the source of goodness, of morality, of justice, of beauty, of these things. And so you are invited into this direct connection with the source itself, let alone the fact that we are indwelled by the Holy Spirit, who are these things himself as well. And so I think sometimes, again, so often we take for granted, and a lot of the point of this podcast is recognizing the things that we take for granted and be like, guys, we are invited to be a part of it and, indwelled, to be lived in the source itself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's crazy, because if you're eating a cheeseburger, right? Or you got like an ice cream, it's one thing to say, man, this, whatever is in this has really tricked the cells in my tongue, whatever is in my tongue, into thinking it's beautiful and it tastes good, right? And I like that it's tricked my mind into thinking that. But beauty itself isn't real, right? Or even tastiness isn't a real thing. All that's real is atoms, right? Swirling in a void and making you feel the illusion of these other things. But, those are just social constructs. There's no such thing as tastiness itself. It's just, it's just subjective to different cultures and times and places. There's no such thing as beauty itself, right? And so if that's your worldview, that's essentially nihilism, right? And so you can still enjoy and take pleasure in the candy bar, right? But as you're saying, if you actually think that beauty, and I'm using beauty as anything that's a beautiful encounter. So I would include music, poetry, swimming, sex, food, all of the bodily and the physical things are part of the aesthetic makeup of the world. If you then say that those are actually not just beautiful, but actually participate in beauty itself and draw the eye upward, you now encounter God potentially in everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not just in I'm going to force myself to pray 24/7, but every time I enjoy my life, every time I feel pleasure or beauty, anytime I gaze upon a sunset, or even just feel warm water on my toes, or, like anytime, you are actually encountering the one who is beauty itself, in which those things participate. And idolatry is, I think, mistaking those things for the thing in itself.
Yeah.
Right. But as a means to pointing to the thing in itself, they should be encountered and enjoyed and indulged. And the problem is not that you're enjoying those things. It's when you stop there and don't go higher. But I think you're right. It just makes every good, beautiful, and true thing weighted with all of eternity in a way that has revolutionized my prayer life. Because I still talk to God. Yeah. I still use words, but I also just go for a walk and feel my hand against the bark. And it's like, hey, that's some good stuff. You know what I mean? And it's God's, it's not that God is the world, but God is experienced through it all now for me in that way.
Well, and that's kind of what Paul is getting at in Romans 1, this idea that all of creation should point to is you have no excuse to not know God because you see creation. And he's literally saying somebody made all that, and this is pointing back to the source itself. I love that. And it really opens up our definition of worship is not just getting to sing songs back to God in love, but in truly taking in all of the goodness that he has given us in all things, whether that is, as you said, music, all the way to warm water on your toes. I don't know how much warm water you get in North Dakota, but so that's
I think probably cold water is better, or maybe just when you're. There's a moment when the hobbits have been like captured, and it's horrible, and then their feet touch the grass again, and they suddenly feel alive again. Yeah. I think, anyways, keep going.
No, no, it's really, it's taking in all these things and but allowing it to point you back to the source. And again, from a doable discipleship perspective, it's not that it has to be, okay, now I'm going to sit and have this long meditation. No, it can be something as simple as like, God, thank you. And that's, and just saying, wow, I appreciate the beauty in this. I appreciate the sensory gift that this is giving me at any point in time, because that's how God made us. He made us to enjoy this world, to enjoy life. And that's a big part of this. And so
it is good.
Yeah, it is good. But when you were talking about the tastiness a bit earlier, I couldn't help but think of taste and see that the Lord is good. Like there is, God even encourages that, which is just perfect. Now, as I was reading through the book, I came across a chapter that I was like, I bet you that this was his favorite chapter to write. And then I came to the last chapter and I was like, well, maybe this might be his favorite chapter to write. For me personally, the down the hill chapter of Moses taking the 10 commandments back down the mountain, that's where I had my most fun, because I was sitting there just A, laughing, B, thinking of Mel Brooks's The History of the World Part 1, where Moses drops the 15, he drops the final tablet with the 15 commandments, and he's like, these 10 commandments. But it really lives in this picture of Moses as human. And that's what I wanted to kind of lead into with this part of the conversation, is talking about how fun it is to engage in the humanity of Moses. In that chapter I mentioned earlier, where he's walking down the mountain, you're doing this retelling of Moses. These things were probably heavy. These are written in stone. And Moses is up on this giant mountain, and he has to walk down it. And he probably has to stop every 10, 15 minutes and sit there and huff and puff. At one point, he passes out and he's face down in the dirt and throws up. I was just like, this is JD having fun now. We're writing this part. So to talk about the humanity, and then we'll leave the last chapter, the conversation between Moses and enemy for the next part of the conversation. But I would talk about all of the fun that you had in writing about Moses the human.
Yeah, I think that was the fun part. And like I said before, I think our writing should have big ideas. I think it's actually an anti-religious, an anti-philosophical sentiment that says the ideas shouldn't intrude into the story. Yeah. I think they should. Yeah. They should, but they should be incarnated. They should, I think sometimes people think of God sticking his nose into the world and interrupting things and make room for Jesus here. Yeah. Oh, yeah, here's my miracle. But I think incarnation is saying this is where eternity and time wed. It's not one or the other. It's both, right? And so I think that's true not just of Christ, but I think Christ as the Logos, it's true of his whole universe, right? Yeah. And so I really enjoyed Moses having these big things going on, but then he's also got these petty things that he's like, why do I have to carry these tablets down the mountain? This is ridiculous, God. Yeah. It was fun. And it's fun. It's fun to find those little moments amongst the big moments, and to find and to tie them together through story. Because if you're just stuck in logical propositions, this is true, that's true, it can be hard to see how seemingly opposite things such as grand ideas and human personal moments come together in terms of sheer logic. But they come together in story, in narrative, and in characters. And so I think, Moses is a vehicle to have a human who's more than human, or at least encountering something more than human, and for those seemingly opposite categories to be held together in a person's life. Which, I mean, we all hold together seemingly opposite things in our lives, tensions. We worship a God who is goodness itself, and yet we exist in a world that seems often anything but that. And we have to live in those tensions. And on an abstract, speculative logic level, I'm not sure how to make sense. Honestly, I think you can help make better sense of those things, but I've never heard someone who solved it. But I've seen people who live it.
Yeah.
You know, I've read testimonies by Holocaust survivors who still believe in God. I don't know how they've propositionally negotiated those things, but in a character, they've managed to bring them together in one life. And so I enjoyed doing that with Moses. It was a lot of fun. And I don't know if it's the biblical Moses. I don't think I did anything that violates the story, but I wanted to enjoy seeing the possibilities of it. Maybe it's close to The Chosen in that way, though probably a lot more philosophical. To
me, what it does for me is it helps to ground the story in a way that it's like, oh yeah, like these are people dealing with human things. So you write a lot about what people may have been like smelling at the time or seeing, or how hard things could be, you know, right? And talk about things in a way that allows you as the reader to remind yourself that you're not just reading about some biblical story with all that, you know, that, and it feels so far removed. Instead, it's an invitation to kind of look at this story that you so well know, but in a grounded way that then presents a healthy and helpful contrast when you're talking about, you know, these grand philosophical things of being itself, beauty itself, and painting this picture of something else that, but it always comes back to, but Moses is in the dirt, and or these things are hard, right? Or these things happen and whatnot. So to me, it as I said, it allows for this groundedness so that when you are engaging in the philosophical thinking with Moses, you're coming at it from a place of like, oh, like, yeah, that feels real. Like that feels like a natural way to be asking these questions and then pointing back to the answer of those questions. And so it feels lived in and accessible in a way that is always pointing back to those big ideas.
Yeah,
that's what I took from it.
I'm glad.
And it's fun.
I mean, that's the goal. That should be for any Christian, should be incarnation, right?
Yeah.
So the big and the small coming together.
Yeah, the lived inness for sure. So that then takes us to a scene where we get to Moses on the top of the mountain. And he's this is later. This is not the mountain with the 10 Commandments. This is later. We get a 40 years later note, as said like SpongeBob, 40 years later, and we get Moses on top of the mountain. So talk about how you get to your, you know, I don't know if you want to call it like your Job opening or your Screw Tape Letters part, but this conversation between Moses and enemy here. I talk about how fun that was for you and what brought you to that point of, I want Moses to have a conversation that is his leading to not just accepting, but pointing to God as justice.
Yeah. I think, the length of the Moses story is really interesting because this is not a quick story, right? There's 40 years between all of this, and I'm still pretty young, but I'm starting to realize how much time just changes everything. The stuff that's starting to happen, the people who are starting to die, the things that are going on with my kids and my family and the world. I'm just like, wow, I'm only in my 30s. I might have another 60 years of this. Oh my, this is gonna kill me. And I guess that's the point. Yeah. But Moses, he lives a long time. And I love that it's not a comically long time.
Yeah, it's not 900 years.
Yeah, it's an amount of time that's like, okay, there's people that have lived over 100. So I'm tracking here, but at least I don't have to be, he's not 900 or something. I don't have to make that leap. He lives a long time, and a long time in the desert, 40 years, right? Like, how I imagine there's maturity and spiritual growth and saint-likeness in him, but I think there's also going to be some grumpiness.
Yeah.
And he's old, and he's dealing with people whose stubbornness has meant that he's never going to see the promised land, and his own failures as well. Like I enjoyed the last chapter imagining him as basically a grumpy old man. And I know a lot of people hate what was done in The Last Jedi movie when Luke Skywalker is, basically like, I don't believe any of this anymore. And
grumpy old Jedi. Yeah.
Whether or not you think that movie was executed well as a whole, and I have my qualms, it was a neat thought.
Yeah.
And maybe we didn't want it to be done with Star Wars. Maybe we just wanted Luke to come out and kick some butt with lightsabers. I get that. But it wasn't, from a literary standpoint, it was a very interesting move to make, to have Luke basically have given up on all of this and just be like, no, it's just, and I kind of wanted to have that a little bit with Moses. And I wanted him to be haunted, particularly by the death of the firstborn, the last plague. And because I don't think you see that and come back from it this side of heaven. I think the same thing could be said with the Noah story.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of Christians did not like the 2014 Russell Crowe one. Yeah. And there's things to dislike about it, but I don't think that was an inaccurate portrayal of the psychology of what Noah would have gone through. And even biblically speaking, the guy gets drunk and naked on the beach. Like, this is a man, like I think I wanted to have Moses, the book end with less certainty than the rest of the book had. Because I'm pretty comfortable in my worldview. I think the idea of God is goodness, beauty, love, truth. For me, that stands up to skepticism.
Yeah.
And yet I still have some nagging questions. And I imagine Moses, despite having seen all these miracles, would have them as well, because the other people, everyone saw the miracles, and even they started to doubt, right? Yeah. So the final chapter is Moses being haunted, and haunted specifically by Satan, who's there to tempt him in the desert. And I didn't feel like that was such a stretch, because the New Testament deliberately parallels Jesus's 40 days of temptation by Satan in the desert with the Old Testament story of Moses in the desert for a period of 40. And even the Sermon on the Mount, which comes immediately after. Matthew 5 comes after Matthew 4, where Jesus is tempted in the desert. Yeah. And the Sermon on the Mount is the new law. It's, him going up the mountain right next to being tempted in the desert. So I wanted to make that connection. And so Moses has a conversation with Satan. And I didn't want Moses to be the valiant knight of light against Satan's darkness. I wanted Satan to almost get him. Yeah. Because I imagine 120 in the desert. I imagine there were moments where Moses was like, and particularly I have Satan bring up the things that Moses struggles with the death of the firstborn. And I think sometimes Christian fiction resolves our conundrums too quickly. And that's when we lose drama and honesty and depth. I think we need to leave things a little more unresolved, because life leaves them unresolved. We're not in heaven. We're not one with the God of truth, not fully yet. So there's things that won't be fully made sense of yet for us. That's okay. And also, I think that type of writing, instead of resolving things for the audience, you leave them with a tension that continues to bounce around in their heads afterwards. Because if you tell them the answer, they can either reject that or accept it. But you leave them an enigma, they try to solve it themselves when they leave. And they might continue thinking about it for a while. And I kind of wanted to leave the story with that enigma, and particularly brought in justice, the question of how justice and love come together. And I wanted Moses to really be struggling with that. and to be gesturing towards a resolution in Christ that he didn't have the categories for yet.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was kind of all of the last chapter. Was I wanted an old Moses who was bitter and tired and racked by doubts, and who Satan's close to devouring.
Yeah.
Like it's yeah.
Well, and again, to put it in terms of like how we can read this, and the book has a whole study guide at the end of it. So, but to put it in terms of how does it relate to us? It's a very clear picture of like, hey, we are not always at our best. And there are so many times when we're just worn down by life, by things that we've seen, by suffering, by hurt, by pain, all these things that are true. And those are things that Satan can try to use to get you to not just doubt, but to walk away, to view God as something other than who he is. And so that it's a picture of that wrestling. And I love that you grounded it in justice, especially because there's so many times where we can look at things either that we've done or things that we've seen happen in the world, and we can kind of question or whatnot. But pointing back to justice, even the idea of Satan calling out Moses' sin. Well, you are a murderer, and you did these things, and Moses having to sit there and wrestle with that and take it, but pointing kind of back to justice itself. And he's walking through those logical steps while still feeling the effect of, the discomfort of the sadness, the hurt, all that struggle. And so you're walking with something that can be so relatable to us. And then what Moses gets in this story is this Deus Ex Machina bit at the end of crush. And all of a sudden, who appears? And so I enjoyed that you then use the reality of Moses' death to also use it as an opportunity to point to the future, to point to Christ and to point to what is to come. I just personally deeply appreciated that it's a wonderful way to spend time in something that is both so human, but is constantly reflecting and pointing back to and making you think about something that is so divine, that is so the source of all things. So as we start to wrap up our time today, what do you want to have people thinking about? Or besides, hey, read the book, which I'm encouraging people to do. With everything that we've been talking about today, about source, about reality, about philosophy, even going back to what we talked about Zeus and other gods and all these types of things, what do you want to leave people thinking about as they walk away from our conversation today?
Yeah, I think I want people to have a bigger view of God.
Yeah.
A God who isn't just a being, but is being itself. Because I think a lot of us have an understanding of God as essentially a Zeus character. Or, to give an easier example, Thor.
Yeah.
Right? Thor is very powerful. He's arguably the most powerful among all creatures, and we call him a god. But Thor was born, I think, 5,000 years ago, even in the Greek even in the Norse mythology. Like Zeus, Thor is a created being, and even his father, all-seeing Odin, began to exist, right? And if this is the kind of God we think that we're imagining, that has massive, just all across the board. You're not really encountering the transcendent or the divine. You're encountering a projection of creaturely humanity, just writ larger, right? Because Thor is basically a human, but stronger.
Yeah.
Right? He's not
with an awesome hammer.
The creator.
Yeah,
with an awesome hammer. He's not the creator. He's just the strongest creature among other creatures. And I think this has just massive repercussions for everything, because if that's the kind of God you're picturing, then of course you don't encounter that God when you sink your feet into the grass. I don't encounter Thor when I do that. But if you're talking about a God who is beauty, itself, then he's not another creature on the same plane here where it's either him or something else. He's that which grounds all of this. All of this points to him. So I think that leads to a very different encounter with God. It's a much bigger view of God, but then ironically, it's even smaller in other ways, because then God isn't just the big ground of all things. He's intimately in all of the details and moments.
Yeah.
And so the larger you make God, I think the more that loops back to the more intimate and personal and near and close you can make God. And I think by making God close first, the Greek mythological universe lost both the transcendent, but also the close, because Zeus is neither the transcendent creator, nor is he here giving me a hug. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's on Mount Olympus. He can't be on Mount Olympus and here at the same time. It's one or the other. He's a creature.
Yeah.
And so I think this view of God is bigger, but it's also more intimate at the same time, because then you're encountering him in everything. And I think it also makes more sense of things like you got into justice there. If you're imagining God as Zeus, as a being that is just able to decide one day to be just and another day not to be, because that's what created whims and free will can do, right?
Yeah.
Like we can just decide, oh, I'm going to be a jerk to you, but I'm going to be nice to you. That's what creatures can do with our freedom, right? And if you're imagining that kind of God, then it's very hard to understand the atonement as anything other than God being a jerk.
Yeah.
Because he could have chosen to do otherwise, but he's choosing to punish, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of substitutionary atonement model, I think that's one of the reasons people have trouble with substitutionary atonement, is they're picturing Zeus. They're picturing Zeus being like, I have to punish Hercules, right? But if you're talking about a God who is justice itself, right? Who grounds the very moral value of justice. And I think at the end of the day, most of us want to believe in justice. I think ironically, today people choose between social justice or the gospel justice. But at the heart of that is the God who is justice itself. You can't have social justice without a God who is just. And I think once you imagine God as justice itself, then it's not possible for him to not be just any more than it's possible for 2 + 2 to equal 5. You can't have justice at the heart of all things and not have all things be just in the end. That's not even a question. That's just a category mistake to think that that's possible. So I think it makes more sense of the atonement. I think it also stretches an olive branch to other religious traditions. Justice is very important to other religions. Mm-hmm. And I think karma is an interesting parallel here. Yeah. But at the same time, while we might share the justice, I think we have a resolution where love and justice come together. So hey, we're similar, but we also have something interesting to add to this. So maybe let's talk about that. I think Christians, I'd like to see us having a bigger conversation and a bigger God who, the more transcendent he is, the more immanent he is. Yeah. And the more close and personal and near.
Well, I love how it's all wrapped up in that burning bush scene, right? I am. It doesn't get more transcendent than just saying, I am who I am. And that's kind of what sets off everything else into motion, is this, hey, I am the source. Everything is found in me. I am.
Yeah.
Well, the book, as we've said, Zeus Was An Atheist, J.D. Lyonhart. I appreciate it. The link is in the show notes. I encourage you to check it out. Would you mind closing us in prayer?
Yeah, for sure. And to be clear, I'm not going to use words. I'm just going to go for a walk.
There we go. Yeah. And he's gone.
Being might be more than personal, but I don't think it's less. So I think it's okay to still use personal words and language and stuff like that. God's still personal. He's the word. He uses words.
That's right.
God, thank you so much for this conversation, and for Jason, and for letting me kind of inception him into being my friend slowly for these talks. And I pray that wherever our audience is, that you meet them today in the little moments, in the beautiful things, the good things, the true things, and that we can all see you everywhere, all the time, but also see beyond the everything and all that is in front of us, and be raised by that light to the source of it, to you. God, help us to know you, and to love you, and to feel your love in all of the things that are, for you are the one who is. In your name, amen.